I'm leaving you, and I've already sold the house to move in with my new girl. Good luck finding a place. Alan chuckled through the phone before hanging up. I sat there in the conference room of Gravenhall Group, looking at my client across the mahogany table, and felt something cold settle in my chest. Not heartbreak, relief. My name is Natalie Pierce. I'm 43 years old, and I'm a commercial real estate broker here in Jersey City, New Jersey. For the past 18 years, I've been married to a man who thought my success was his personal ATM. What I wanted was simple: respect, partnership, and basic human decency. What stood in my way was a husband who saw my achievements as opportunities for his next get-rich-quick scheme. The injustice I faced was watching someone I loved systematically try to destroy everything I'd built with my own hands. I turned to my client, Mr. Harrison from Iron Veil Robotics, and smiled. I'm sorry about that interruption. Where were we with the warehouse specifications? But even as I discussed square footage and loading docks, my mind was calculating. Alan had always been careless with details, especially legal ones. 3 major financial disasters in our marriage had taught me to protect myself. The gambling debts when I was 35, the failed restaurant investment 2 years later, then last year's cryptocurrency nightmare that nearly bankrupted us. After that third mess, I'd quietly done something Alan never knew about. I'd refinanced our house through my business LLC and transferred ownership to Gravenhall Group Properties, my company. The mortgage payments came from my business account. The deed was in my company's name, legally, permanently, and completely. I finished the contract review, shook hands with Mr. Harrison, and walked to my car with measured steps. The September afternoon was crisp, and as I drove through the familiar streets toward home, I thought about the backup documents in my office safe. I thought about the cease and desist letters my attorney had prepared months ago, just in case. Most of all, I thought about Alan's smug voice and how it would sound when reality hit him. My phone buzzed with a text from his number. Don't bother coming home. We're already moving in. My lawyer says you can't do anything about it. I actually laughed out loud. Alan's lawyer, if he even had one, clearly hadn't done his homework. Neither had Alan. In 18 years of marriage, he'd never once looked at our financial documents, never questioned how the bills got paid, never wondered why I'd been so insistent about handling all the paperwork after his last disaster. As I pulled into my driveway, I could see lights on inside and unfamiliar boxes stacked by the front door. This was going to be even easier than I'd imagined. I'd always been the responsible one in our marriage. While Alan dreamed big and schemed bigger, I built a real estate empire one commission at a time. My company, Gravenhall Group Properties, started in a tiny office above a sandwich shop 15 years ago. Now we handled commercial properties throughout northern New Jersey, and my personal portfolio was worth more than Alan had ever bothered to calculate. Growing up in Newark, I'd learned early that security came from your own efforts, not from depending on others. My mother had lost everything when my father left, and I swore I'd never be that vulnerable. That's why I'd always kept separate business accounts, why I'd insisted on maintaining my maiden name professionally, and why I'd quietly restructured our assets after Alan's financial disasters. Alan saw my success differently. To him, my achievements were validation of his own importance. After all, he was married to a successful businesswoman. He loved telling people at parties about our real estate company, about our investments, about our financial success. He never mentioned that he hadn't contributed a meaningful dollar to any of it in years. The warning signs had been there for months. Late nights when he claimed to be working on his latest business venture. Phone calls he took in the garage. New clothes I'd never seen him buy. But the real tell was how he'd started questioning our financial arrangements, asking about property values and mortgage details with a casual air that wasn't casual at all. 2 weeks ago, I'd caught him photographing documents in my home office. When I confronted him, he'd laughed it off, claiming he was just trying to understand our finances better. I'd pretended to believe him while quietly moving all important paperwork to my business office and setting up additional security measures. Now, sitting in my car looking at my own house, I understood what he'd been planning. In his mind, he'd found the perfect exit strategy: sell the house, pocket the proceeds, and disappear with his new girlfriend before I could stop him. It was actually clever, in a completely illegal and morally bankrupt way. I pulled out my phone and called my attorney, Vincent Rodriguez. "Vincent, it's Natalie. Remember those contingency documents we prepared? I need them tonight." "The cease and desist papers? What happened?" "Alan tried to sell my house to fund his escape plan. Can you meet me at the office in an hour?" "Already sold? Natalie, that's fraud." "Yes, I know. 1 hour, Vincent. Bring everything." I hung up and sat for a moment, watching shadows move behind my living room curtains. Alan was in there celebrating his cleverness with whatever woman had helped him plan this betrayal. They had no idea what was coming. The pieces fell together like a brutal puzzle as I recalled the past few months. Alan's secretive behavior hadn't just been about an affair. It had been about orchestrating my complete financial ruin. He'd been methodically gathering information, photographing documents, and clearly consulting with someone who'd convinced him he could steal my life's work. The moment that changed everything had happened 3 weeks ago during dinner. Alan had casually mentioned that property values in our neighborhood were probably at their peak, and wondered aloud if we should consider our options. I'd dismissed it as idle conversation, but now I realized he'd been testing the waters, seeing if I'd give him any information he could use. Then last week, I'd come home early from a client meeting to find him in my office, hunched over my computer. The screen went black the moment I walked in, and Alan had jumped up with that guilty smile I'd learned to recognize over the years. "Just checking email," he'd said. But my computer required a password he didn't know. Unless someone had helped him crack it. Unless someone with more technical skills had been coaching him through this entire scheme. The real shock had come this morning when I'd reviewed my business accounts and noticed some unusual activity. Someone had attempted to access our joint checking account multiple times over the past week. The attempts had failed because I'd changed all the passwords after catching Alan at my computer, but the pattern was clear. He'd been trying to drain our accounts before disappearing. Now, watching my house filled with boxes and celebrating thieves, I felt that familiar cold clarity that had gotten me through every crisis in my business. Alan wasn't just leaving me. He was trying to destroy me. The house sale wasn't about starting fresh with his new girlfriend. It was about making sure I had nothing left to restart with. But Alan had made one crucial mistake. He'd assumed I was the same trusting woman I'd been 18 years ago, someone who'd let him handle important decisions while I focused on building my career. He'd never bothered to learn how my business actually worked, never paid attention to the legal structures I'd created to protect myself after his previous failures. The house he'd just sold belonged to Gravenhall Group Properties, LLC. Not to Alan Pierce, not to Natalie Pierce, to my business entity, which he had no legal connection to whatsoever. The mortgage was in my company's name, the deed was recorded under my LLC, and every payment for the past 2 years had come from my business accounts. I'd essentially bought my own house back from myself after his cryptocurrency disaster, ensuring he could never again gamble away our shelter. It had been a precaution I'd hoped never to need. But as I sat in my driveway, listening to laughter and celebration drifting from my windows, I realized this precaution was about to become my weapon. Alan had tried to sell something that wasn't his to someone who was about to learn an expensive lesson about due diligence. Time to go inside and educate them both. I took a deep breath and walked up to my own front door, keys ready. The sound of voices inside grew clearer, Alan's familiar laugh mixing with a woman's higher-pitched giggling. They were discussing paint colors. "I think we should go with something warmer in the bedroom," the woman was saying. "This beige is so dated." "Whatever you want, Jessica," Alan replied. "It's our house now. We can do anything we want with it." I slid my key into the lock and stepped inside. The living room was chaos, boxes everywhere, my personal belongings shoved carelessly into corners, and 2 people who froze the moment they saw me. Alan recovered first. "Natalie, you're not supposed to be here. I told you." "You told me you sold the house," I interrupted, setting my purse down on the entrance table that was apparently now covered with someone else's mail. "I'm curious, who exactly did you sell it to?" The woman, Jessica, was younger than I'd expected. Maybe early 30s, with the kind of confidence that comes from believing you've won something important. She stepped forward with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm Jessica, Alan's fiancée. We understand this is awkward, but the house belongs to us now. I'm sure you can find somewhere else to stay tonight." I studied them both, noting how Alan's hands shook slightly as he lit a cigarette. He only smoked when he was nervous. "Fiancé? That's interesting. When exactly did you 2 get engaged?" 3 months ago, Jessica said proudly, showing off a ring I'd never seen before. Right after Alan explained how his wife was holding him back financially. The audacity was breathtaking. 3 months ago, Alan had been begging me to help him out of another investment disaster, swearing he'd learned his lesson about risky ventures. Apparently his new venture had been planning to steal my house. "And the sale," I continued calmly. "When did that happen?" Alan finally found his voice. "Yesterday. The papers are signed, the money's transferred. It's done, Natalie. You need to accept that and move on." I walked over to the kitchen counter where he'd spread out some official-looking documents. Real estate purchase agreements, transfer forms, even what looked like a deed. Someone had put significant effort into creating this fiction. "These are impressive," I said, flipping through the pages. "Very professional looking. Who's the buyer listed here?" "Sunset Properties," Jessica answered quickly. "We found them through a real estate investor Alan knows. They paid cash. Above market value, actually." The lies were getting more elaborate by the minute. I pulled out my phone and called Vincent Rodriguez while they watched. "Vincent, I'm at the house now." "Yes, they're here." "Can you conference in the title company? I need them to confirm ownership records for this address." Alan stepped forward, trying to grab my phone. "You can't do this. The sale is final." "The sale of what?" I asked, dodging his reach. "Vincent, yes, I'll hold." Jessica was looking less confident now. "Alan, what is she doing? You said she couldn't stop us." "She can't," Alan insisted, but his voice had lost its earlier bravado. "The paperwork is all legal." "Oh, the paperwork might be legal," I agreed. "The problem is you can't sell something you don't own." I put my phone on speaker as Vincent's voice filled the room. "Natalie, I have the title company on the line. They've confirmed that this property is owned by Gravenhall Group Properties, LLC. Has been for the past 2 years. No transfers, no liens, no pending sales." The silence that followed was beautiful. Jessica's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Confusion, realization, then growing fury. "Alan, what the hell is he talking about? You said you owned this house." "I do own it," Alan snapped, but his voice cracked. "We're married. What's hers is mine." "Actually," I said, still holding my phone on speaker. "Vincent, would you mind explaining community property law as it applies to business entities?" Vincent's voice was professionally neutral, but I could hear the satisfaction underneath. "In New Jersey, assets held by a limited liability company are separate from personal marital property, even if one spouse owns the company. If Gravenhall Group Properties owns this house, then Mr. Pierce has no legal claim to it whatsoever." Alan's face was shifting from confusion to panic. "That's impossible. I live here. I pay for things here." "When was the last time you actually paid for anything here?" I asked. "The mortgage comes from my business account. Utilities, insurance, property taxes, all business expenses. You haven't contributed to this household in over 3 years." Jessica rounded on Alan. "You told me this was your house. You said your wife was just being vindictive about the divorce." "Divorce?" I raised an eyebrow. Alan, did you forget to mention that we're not actually getting divorced? You never filed papers, never served me with anything. You just decided to sell my house and disappear. The color drained from Alan's face as the magnitude of his situation hit him. He hadn't just attempted to commit adultery, he'd committed fraud. Real estate fraud. The kind that involved prison time. Vincent's voice cut through the tension. Natalie, I've also pulled the records on this supposed sale to Sunset Properties. There's no such entity registered in New Jersey. The tax identification number on these documents belongs to a landscaping company in Pennsylvania that's been defunct for 5 years. Jessica stared at the papers scattered across my counter. These are fake? All of this is fake? Fake documents? Fake company? Fake sale? I confirmed. The only real thing here is the crime Alan just committed by forging my signature on legal documents. Alan finally seemed to grasp the seriousness of his situation. Natalie, wait. We can work this out. I made a mistake. You made several mistakes, I corrected. You committed fraud. You forged my signature. You attempted to steal property worth over $500,000, and you did it all while lying to both me and her about your intentions. Jessica was backing toward the door. Her earlier confidence completely evaporated. I didn't know, she said quickly. He told me he owned this place. I thought it was all legal. Did you put any money into this supposed purchase? I asked. Her silence was answer enough. She'd invested in this fantasy, probably contributed to what she thought was a down payment or closing costs. Money that had likely gone straight into Alan's pocket. I looked at both of them, my soon-to-be ex-husband and his accomplice in grand theft. Here's what's going to happen. You're both going to leave my house immediately. You're going to take your boxes, your lies, and your fake engagement ring with you. Where are we supposed to go? Jessica demanded. That's not my problem anymore, I replied. But I suggest you figure it out quickly, because in about an hour, I'm filing a police report for fraud, forgery, and attempted theft. How long that gives you to disappear depends on how fast you can pack. Alan opened his mouth to argue, but Vincent's voice stopped him. Mr. Pierce, I strongly recommend you consult with a criminal defense attorney. Tonight. The true scope of their situation was finally sinking in, and the panic in Alan's eyes told me he was beginning to understand just how thoroughly he'd destroyed his own life. Alan's desperation kicked in as the reality of his situation crystallized. Natalie, please, don't do this. We've been married 18 years. I know I messed up, but we can fix this. Fix this? I couldn't help but laugh. Alan, you forged my signature to steal my house. You've been planning this for months. You got engaged to another woman while we were still married. Exactly which part of this do you think can be fixed? Jessica had gone silent, but I could see her mind working. She was calculating her own exposure, wondering if she could be charged as an accomplice. Smart woman. Too bad she'd gotten mixed up with someone as careless as Alan. The documents, Alan said suddenly, lunging toward the counter. If we destroy them, there's no proof. Vincent, I said into my phone, please tell them about the copies. We photographed everything when you called, Vincent's voice confirmed. Plus, the attempted sale was recorded with the county recorder's office this morning. There's a paper trail that can't be erased, Mr. Pierce. Alan slumped against the kitchen island, finally understanding that his scheme hadn't just failed. It had created evidence of his crimes. How did you know? How did you figure it out so fast? I didn't figure it out, Alan. I prevented it. 2 years ago, after your cryptocurrency disaster, I transferred this house to my business. I've been protecting myself from exactly this scenario since your third major financial screw-up. The truth hit him like a physical blow. You've been planning this. You've been waiting for me to... I've been protecting myself from your poor decisions, I corrected. I never imagined you'd actually try to steal from me. I thought even you had limits. Jessica finally spoke up, her voice small. The money I gave you for the down payment. Where is it? Alan's silence answered her question, and her face flushed with anger. You spent it, didn't you? It's gone. I can pay you back, Alan said quickly. Once the dust settles. With what money? Jessica demanded. You don't have a job. You don't own anything. You just committed a felony that's going to follow you for the rest of your life. I watched their partnership dissolve in real time. Jessica grabbed her purse and headed for the door. I'm done. I'm not going to prison because you lied to me about owning a house. Jessica, wait, Alan called after her. We can figure this out. But she was already gone, her footsteps echoing in the driveway as she presumably called someone to pick her up. Within minutes, I heard a car drive away. Alan turned back to me, desperation replacing his earlier arrogance. She's right. I don't have anything left. The money she gave me is gone. I spent it on the engagement ring and deposits for our new apartment. If you press charges, I'll go to prison. That's generally what happens when you commit felonies, I replied calmly. Natalie, I'm begging you, don't destroy my life over this. I looked at my husband of 18 years, this man who'd just tried to steal everything I'd worked for, and felt nothing but pity. Alan, you destroyed your own life. I'm just refusing to let you destroy mine in the process. Vincent's voice interrupted the moment. Natalie, the police are asking if you want to file charges tonight or wait until morning. I looked around my living room, at the boxes full of belongings that didn't belong here, at the man who'd betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible. Tonight, Vincent, I'll be at the station within the hour. Alan's face crumpled as he realized I wasn't going to save him from the consequences of his actions. For the first time in our marriage, he was going to face the full weight of his choices, and I was finally going to be free. I drove to the police station with a sense of calm I hadn't felt in years. Detective Morrison took my statement while Vincent provided the legal documentation proving my ownership of the house and the fraudulent nature of Alan's attempted sale. This is pretty straightforward fraud, Detective Morrison said, reviewing the fake documents. Forged signature, fictitious buyer, attempted theft of property over $500,000. That's a Class B felony. What kind of sentence does that carry? I asked. 5 to 10 years, depending on his record and whether he cooperates. I thought about Alan's previous financial disasters, none of which had been criminal, but all of which showed a pattern of poor judgment. He doesn't have a criminal record, but this isn't his first time making catastrophically bad decisions. Vincent handed over a folder thick with documentation. We've also got evidence of the conspiracy aspect, the fake company registration, the forged identification documents used to create the fraudulent buyer entity. His girlfriend was involved in at least some of the planning. Within 2 hours, I'd filed a comprehensive police report and initiated the process that would likely send my husband to prison. I felt no satisfaction in it, just relief that the threat to my financial security was being neutralized. As I drove home, I passed Alan's car parked at a 24-hour diner near the highway. Through the window, I could see him hunched over a cup of coffee, probably trying to figure out what to do next. His phone was pressed to his ear, likely calling lawyers, family members, anyone who might help him navigate the disaster he'd created. I didn't stop. That part of my life was over. Back at my house, I walked through the rooms, collecting the belongings Alan and Jessica had scattered around. Most of it was worthless: cheap jewelry, outdated electronics, clothes from discount stores. I bagged it all up and set it by the front door. Tomorrow, I'd have the locks changed. Tonight, I'd start planning my new life. The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal proceedings and paperwork. Alan had indeed hired a criminal defense attorney, but the evidence against him was overwhelming. Vincent kept me updated on the case's progress while I focused on rebuilding my life. The strangest part was how quickly I adapted to living alone. 18 years of marriage, and within a week of Alan's arrest, I felt more peaceful than I had in years. No more wondering where money was disappearing to. No more unexpected financial crises. No more walking on eggshells around someone whose next scheme might destroy everything I'd built. My business thrived without the distraction of Alan's chaos. I closed 3 major deals in the month following his arrest, including a warehouse complex that netted me a 6-figure commission. For the first time in years, I could focus entirely on my work without worrying about what disaster Alan might create while I was in meetings. Jessica, it turned out, had cooperated fully with the police investigation in exchange for immunity from prosecution. She'd provided evidence of Alan's planning process, including text messages where he'd bragged about finally getting what he deserved from our marriage. Her cooperation sealed his fate. The divorce proceedings were remarkably simple. Alan had no assets to claim, no legitimate grievances to air, and a pending felony conviction that made him eager to avoid additional legal scrutiny. I kept the house, the business, and my retirement accounts. He kept his freedom until sentencing, which wasn't scheduled for another 2 months. I celebrated by redecorating the house exactly how I'd always wanted it: clean lines, modern furniture, and absolutely no compromise with someone else's terrible taste. Every room reflected my choices, my preferences, my vision for how a home should feel. For the first time in my adult life, I was living entirely for myself. It was intoxicating. Looking back on those tumultuous weeks, I realized that Alan's betrayal had given me the greatest gift imaginable: complete freedom from his chaos and the chance to build a life based entirely on my own choices and achievements. Sometimes, the best revenge is simply refusing to let someone else's destruction touch your own carefully built world.